and welcome to this video on professionalism and being a better leader. My name is Micah Holmes, and I am the Chief Technology Officer for Ethos Genesis. And today we're going to talk about just basically being a better leader or better manager and how to better communicate. The first thing I want to talk about is avoiding inappropriate conversations. This is very important, especially if you are a manager or a C-level individual and an employee in general as well. And a lot of this may seem like common sense, which it is. But here's the problem. A lot of us get comfortable talking to certain individuals, whether it be our clients, our boss, friends, whatever the case may be. We get comfortable talking to people and we forget to mind our manners. This also happens a lot in business, and I'm going to give you several examples throughout this video where I've experienced people not minding their manners. But something to keep in mind is don't tell inappropriate jokes. I'm not saying don't joke, I'm saying don't tell inappropriate jokes. And inappropriate jokes or inappropriate conversation can mean things related to sex, gender, religion, politics, culture, things of that nature. Those things are topics that you 100% always want to avoid in any situation, whether you're talking to your friends, coworkers, or whatever, even if you have a close relationship. The fact of the matter is it only takes one bad joke or one bad conversation that could lead to you being terminated, reprimanded, or just simply getting a bad reputation. Next is sharing information. Now, in today's society, it is so easy to say the wrong thing, and it literally lasts forever. So don't ever share your personal information, especially if you're a manager or a C-level manager. Don't ever do it. Avoid emotional stories. Don't cry. Don't disclose health information. Don't complain. Etc. I know that this again sounds common sense, but I will share a story with you. In the past, I had worked at a place where we had a CTO who loved to call meetings and share personal information. And not only would that person share personal information, he would also cry. Now, the first time that we had attended a meeting that they had scheduled and he had cried, myself and the other managers, we discussed it, and I complained and was like, hey, I think this guy is really appropriate. They're crying, they're sharing personal details, and I really don't find it appropriate for work, and I find it mildly offensive. And my coworkers fired back at me and said, well, they're just passionate. I think they're just passionate about their work. And I said, okay, yeah, I get that, and I brushed it off. And we moved on. But then it became a monthly thing. Like every month, this manager would hold meetings, and there was a couple hundred of us, and they would cry, and they would share personal information related to their health, personal life, including their sex life, which was extremely inappropriate because none of us wanted to know. Absolutely nobody wanted to know. So not only was that inappropriate to share, but it also cost the company a lot of money. When you have 200 people on a phone and you're literally talking for 2 hours about yourself, somebody's paying for that time, whether it be an investor, the company in itself, a client, whoever. Somebody's paying for that time. And that is time that could have been spent working and being productive. Instead, it was spent listening to you share a life story that nobody cares about and nobody wants to hear. So be very cautious about what you share. Also, I want to point out sharing health information is also a giant red flag, especially to your managers, because that basically translates into, oh, well, I guess you may or may not be productive this week. And if you do that one too many times, you're not productive. Obviously, you're going to potentially get terminated. So just keep that in mind. Again, common sense things, but people get comfortable and they share things, and it just really generates a problem. Next is communication. How to communicate. Well, first things first, and we're all probably guilty of this, is don't ever send an email when you're angry. I've done this in the past. I'm guilty of it. I admit it. And the only thing that you can do is just try to get better at it and just stop yourself from doing it. But here's the thing, and here's where it really can spiral. When you send angry emails, whether it be in professional or in your personal, both are equally dangerous, and I'll explain why. First, let's start with the obvious, which is sending angry emails at work. When you send an angry email at work to maybe a boss or a coworker or even a client, you can potentially damage that relationship. With a coworker, they could go to HR. With your boss, you could offend them and they could, want to terminate you. With a client, you could offend them and they could say, hey, you know what, I no longer want to do business with you. So that's how you can affect it at work. But believe it or not, even sending an email in your personal time can affect your work too. So, for example, I buy a washer and dryer, for example, from ABC Company. And I'm dissatisfied with that washer or dryer, so I write them an angry email. Well, let's say that email circulates around within that circle, that business circle. Other businesses hear about it. And then that email makes its way into other business circles, and so on and so forth. Let's say 6 months down the line, I decide that I want to go look for a new position for whatever reason. Maybe I was terminated, laid off, or I'm just unhappy where I'm at. I apply for a company that was a part of that circle, that got the email, that read it, and they know my name. Now I may not be hired because I wrote an emotional letter to a company on my own personal time, so now it's going to affect my ability to find work. So don't do it regardless. Next is don't dictate people. Just do not dictate people. This is very common, unfortunately, in management, specifically at C-level, because C-level managers, you kind of have to be a dictator. I mean, you kind of are dictating, but there is a very thin line there between authoritarianism and, being a sovereign leader. So this is where it can be very tricky. But some absolute do nots in any level of management is don't ever tell people who they can and cannot talk to. That is absolutely number one biggest no-no you could possibly do. What you can do and what you should do is trust your employees. Trust that you gave them the tools and the knowledge and the information to know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate to share with clients and other employees and managers. Trust them. If you do not trust your employees, why did you hire them? And that's a big question. Why are they still employed if you don't trust your employee? Which also buys into the concept of you should be investing in your employees. Investing in the sense that, like, you're talking to them, about helping them improve their skills, whether it be their communication skills, the written skills, verbal skill, technical skills, whatever the skill is, you should constantly be working with your employees and improving their skill set. That way, when problems arise like this, where you don't want them to talk to somebody, you can trust that they're going to do the right thing because they have the skills to know what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. The next thing that ties into that is alienating people. Let's say that you have a troubled employee, like you have an employee that you try to avoid. This happens. Believe it or not, this is something that happens all the time in business. So you begin to alienate that employee, and rather than reaching out to that employee or that client, because this happens with clients too, where you have a breakdown in communication, maybe you view them as hostile, whatever the case may be, you begin to alienate them instead of reaching out to them and acknowledging the fact that they're human. Avoid that. If there is a conflict or there is a problem, try to seek a resolution. Try to seek a resolution that's beneficial to both of you or to both of your companies. That's the only way that you're going to solve problems. If you're a leader and you cannot solve problems, you avoid them, then you should probably not be a leader. And that's just the honest truth. Because that's what being a leader is you're solving problems. Whether it be a technical problem or an emotional problem or whatever it is, like with an employee, whatever, your job is to solve problems and to find solutions. That being said, the next part of this is proofreading. We're all guilty of this, and I myself am very guilty of this as well, where this can also cause alienating people or cause you feelings of where you want to tell your employees not to talk to other people, is maybe you send out an email and you did not proofread this email. So it was not interpreted correctly on the receiving end. I've done this before where I've sent emails quickly to my boss and I conveyed the wrong message because I did not proofread it. When I write emails, and a lot of people do this, I write them in the sense of like I'm verbally talking to you, not in a written communication, but more in a verbal perspective. And that is a problem because written skills and verbal skills are two different ways of communicating. So it has to be done differently. So always proofread anything that you write before you share it, because this is potentially, again, it's going to last forever potentially. I never delete emails. And most people don't in business. We keep our emails for a long time until somebody in IT comes to me, and says, hey, you've got 5 terabytes of emails. Could you please clean out your inbox? That's common. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but believe it or not, managers get a lot of email. And we save our email. And we forget to delete it. So it's very common to have at least a terabyte of email. So talking, how to be a better speaker. This is really important when you're doing business meetings. I run into this all the time with speakers. So first thing is don't interrupt others. And we're all guilty of this, but you've got to learn how to be a passive listener. While you're talking, you got to learn how to listen. And I know that that's like next to impossible, but really, believe it or not, that is actually a skill. And if you're a manager, or especially at a C level, you absolutely need to master that skill. You need to be able to stop on a dime, stop yourself in the middle of a conversation, listen to a question, and address it. If you do not have that skill, then you have no business being a leader. You have no business in managing people. So always be ready to listen is basically the takeaway from that. Don't speak over others. I see this all the time with all managers. They will get overly excited about a topic, or a conversation, and they will forget to listen to people and just start speaking over them. It happens all the time. Don't do that. Break yourself of that habit. Be mindful. Always forever be working on that skill and perfecting that skill of being an active listener while you're talking. Next, this is a crucial skill I think that some managers lack, and that's embracing feedback. You really got to learn how to listen to all feedback, good or bad. It may irritate you, it may upset you to hear an employee tell you something negative. That maybe it's a negative view of you as a person. Always be sure to kindly thank them for their criticism and think about a response that is respectful and polite in response to their negative attitude. Even if they give you, continue to be like maybe they're vulgarly offensive or inappropriate. Remain calm and give them a polite thank you for sharing that with me and move on. You can always respond to their inappropriate behavior at a later time and address it at a later time when it's more appropriate and you're better prepared to respond. Don't respond immediately, and don't feel like you're compelled to respond immediately. That's the worst thing you could possibly do. Which brings us to our next point, which is upgrading your skills. Your skills are not limited to just technical, verbal, or written. Those are generally the skills that you want to work on, but you always need to consistently be working on some skill in the business world. Whatever it may be, you need to be perfecting and learning new skills as well as, polishing old skills. And the same can go for your employees. You need to empower your employees. Recommend they take classes on certain things. Recommend certain trainings. Recommend certifications. Recommend, continued education. Always be improving yourself as well as encouraging others to improve themselves as well. That is a good leader. Somebody who values education. Because education is the absolute most valuable thing that you can have in life. Because it's the one thing that nobody can ever take away from you is, having a degree. No matter how bad you do in life, nobody can ever take that away, that achievement from you. You'll always have it. You'll always have that skill that you learn from, that education. Next is record your meetings and take notes. So recording meetings is something that I really, honestly, I love to do. And I do it for multiple reasons. So recording meetings will help you if you missed a question, for example. Let's say that you're a fast talker or you got really excited about a presentation and you missed a question. You can always go back, review the meeting, and email somebody, say, hey, sorry I missed your question. I got a little excited. I'm sorry. Here is the answer to your question. Or could you elaborate more on that question? It's also an opportunity for you to review yourself and how you speak and how you present to others. Did I sound confident? Did I read the room well? Or you could review employees. Did they sound confident? Did they say something inappropriate? Whatever the case may be. Recording a meeting is always a good idea. In fact, it's almost better than taking notes, because when you take notes, you might be distracted from having to write while you're trying to listen, which, as most of us know, that can be a very difficult thing to do. It is a skill. Some people actually have that skill and they do really well at taking notes while listening to a meeting, but most of us generally struggle with that. We're busy trying to type what you say, and then we miss things. So if you record it and go back and take notes, it's a lot easier, because you can always click the pause button. So the last thing we want to talk about is self-introductions. Now, everybody feels probably like an idiot at some point, and don't feel bad. When you're trying to give a professional introduction, we all sometimes feel like, we're just kind of standing there on our soapbox, and there's a spotlight on us and we feel like an idiot. Not a big deal. You got to get past it. So one of the best things that you can do when you're making a self-introduction is always present your professional title. Hello, my name is John Doe, and I'm the senior executive account holder, whatever your title is. Present your professional title, because you worked hard for that title, so you should be able to present it with confidence and pride. Next is your experience. I have X amount of years of experience in this field. I have 26 years of experience in IT, so I'm very proud of that 26 years. You may be just starting out, though, and you may not feel confident about sharing your experience level. You could be saying, I have less than, I only have 1 year. 1 year is better than no years. And even if you have no years of experience, like you have months, weeks, days, or just starting out, at least you're trying. You're making an effort. That says something. You're trying to establish yourself. So speak with confidence and share your experience with confidence. And last but not least is be relatable. I know I had mentioned, and it's going to sound a little bit contradictory, try not to share personal information. You do need to be somewhat relatable, though. Know your audience. Know how to work the crowd. This is where being relatable comes in, and it's a skill. So if I'm at a cat show and I'm a dog lover, people are probably not going to be interested in hearing about my brand new puppy. But let's say that I just got married. That might be an okay topic to share. Yes, I recently got married. Isn't that wonderful news? For the most part, yes, it could be taken negatively. For the most part, it is a positive. However, flip side of that, something I would probably not share, or I would cautiously share, is if I had a baby. And obviously, that's a huge congratulations if you did, but here's the downside to that. Anybody who is a parent knows that it's tough getting your child on a sleep schedule. When you first have a child, for that first 6 months, you're going to be very lethargic, and your performance is going to be very, very much so affected, most likely by having a new child. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Be very careful and selective about what information you share. When you're trying to be relatable, think about it before you say it. Alright, so thanks for watching. If you have any questions or concerns or comments, please feel free to post them below.